I'm really glad to be able to sit with you, brothers and sisters, on this very important topic, this topic of tarbiyah. Um, if you look at the foundational advice that all the hadis, all the guides from the time of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam till Qiyamah are to bring, that foundational piece isn't complex. It's actually summarized in a singular line, right? La ilaha illallah, the submission to none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? There is no worthy of submission, right? Except the only one worthy of submission, Allah. So when we talk about child tarbiyah, we have to talk about it from a foundational level, in the sense that it has to be connected to that. It can't be simply a topic talked about in its own island, disconnected from the overall purpose of tarbiyah, which is what all the hadiths came out to do. So we see that this particular understanding of La ilaha illallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to achieve a really strong understanding of that through conceptualization and through experience. And He's put us in various phases of our lives. And He's placed various individuals around us. Sometimes individuals around us have differences in their intellectual capacities. Other times they have differences in their emotional capacities. And in the case of child tarbiyah, He's placed individuals around us who are different than us, even in their physical capacities. Okay? So the mechanism of La ilaha illallah is still there, meaning that your onset towards tarbiyah can't be something that's disconnected from your overall purpose in existence. Okay? And this overall purpose in existence is to understand the presence of Allah with you. Is to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you. Inna huwa ma'akum aynama kuntum, for example, is one way of looking at it. That He is with you wherever you are. And you in the phase of parenthood are with toddlers. Right? So He's not away from you in that particular time. Okay. Having said this, the primary understanding regarding our toddler is not that it is ours in terms of ownership. So the first distinction that I'm going to talk about today is the distinction between walid or walida and malik, right? Or malika. Can you all hear me clearly? I can definitely hold this like this and talk like this too. Is this better? Okay. So the first item of discussion is the idea of the walid versus the malik. If our understanding of our situation and our kids is that we are the maliks of them, right? Then our perception and our going towards them and how we feel about certain developments of theirs and certain regress of theirs is drastically different than if we look at them as the properties of Allah, but we are the caretakers of these individuals. Do you see that? Okay. Because quite literally we're living in a time in which we're not the sole input regarding what our children consume in terms of intellectual facts, emotional well-being, so on and so forth, right? These little tiny devices that we all have used to ourselves, right, provide a lot of input to our kids, right? So if it's the case that I simply see my success vicariously only through this particular child's success, and every time I see a failure or a decrease in the child, certain individuals who've attuned themselves to the idea of Malik instead of Walid might get a lot of negative feelings, where it basically becomes a question of self-worth being lost. Okay, there has to be an appropriate balance there. You see that? In Islam, we're not talking about the idea that parents are laissez-faire and they said that kids do what you do, I'm going to do what I do. But we're also not talking about the other extreme where a parent is simply attributing their success and their primary identity through their kids' ups and downs only. Meaning if there's a phase that because kids are developing, that means there's a phase of weakness, and that phase of weakness is turning into a phase of strength, correct? Then if that's the case, then a parent, if he only focuses on the weakness aspect of things, might be drowning themselves in a planned failure. Their emotional state might not be positively present such that they can be good parents. You see what I'm trying to say? Secondly speaking, the point that stems from this idea of Malik and Walid is the understanding that reverse Malikiyat is also not supposed to be happening. Meaning, when I'm a parent, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not made my child the owner of my 24 hours. Such that a person sees their primary occupancy as their child, both the baba and the mama. This is extremely important, right? It can't be that a person, in terms of if they play with it, it's completely fine, as long as it records some sort of audio, inshallah, which it will, unless they turn that off, then we're in trouble. But someone record the audio. Okay. So one of the things that is quite detrimental in today's society, especially living in the West, in Canada in particular, that I've seen through various counseling sessions and so on and so forth, and through interaction and through my own family and experience and so on and so forth, is that oftentimes either people fall through one edge or they fall through the other edge. One edge being that they're so disinvolved in the life of the child that they don't know what's going on, basically. Right? They're like the attention, and they're so busy in work or studies or X, Y, Z projects or community building or this and that, that aslan they are not the friends of their family. Aslan their family sees them as a baba but not as a friend. Wife sees them as a position holder of husband but not as a friend, because friendship requires well, you can't fake it. You know what I'm saying? So that's one extreme that you definitely want to avoid. You also want to avoid the other extreme too, where your primary occupancy ends up becoming that child, right? Your entire, because you're supposed to grow in your physical capacities, you're supposed to grow in your intellectual capacities, you're supposed to have societal and social capacities as well developing. You're supposed to, right? There are individuals who would take on certain responsibilities upon themselves towards their children, such that the only thing that they can worry about is their children and nothing else. Right? This is called reverse Malikiyah. Like they own me. No, they don't own you. If I ask you guys to recite salawat, just to help me collect my thoughts too and continue to salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, continuing along with the foundational talk again, started from the idea of La ilaha illallah, right? That has to be seen throughout, that tawajjuh has to be there, that Allah didn't just willy-nilly put us in this situation without a purpose, right? If my overall objective is to be more attentive of Allah in my life, that means that He's provided me and put me in situations that are supposed to test me, such that my tawajjuh is no longer towards Him, right? And in that, maintaining my tawajjuh towards Allah even in the difficult times is exactly where I'm growing and I'm developing. It's so easy to say, oh Allah, I'll remember you whenever, and so on and so forth. It's harder when there actually is a toddler throwing a tantrum, and there is a marital issue going on, and there is other things going on, and then you're supposed to have tawajjuh as well, right? So this phase of raising toddlers is actually the practice ground of, am I actually experiencing La ilaha illallah or not? You see that? Because theoretically speaking, it's very simple. It's a one statement thing. You know, you can glue it on your glasses if you were to see it everywhere. Right? But the reality is that the tawajjuh in of itself, the focus in of itself, has to be implemented through real scenarios, and that includes a leaked diaper. Okay, now there's a leaked diaper here, and this big case, and so on and so forth. In this particular case, did I get riled up and do things and say things and feel things that I shouldn't have felt? Or no, was I able to maintain my tawajjuh or not? You see that? So quite literally, Allah is placing us amongst individuals who are supposed to attract us, either through the sweets and the smiles or the sours and the leaky diapers. You see that? And in this particular presence of both the Jamal and Jalal, the person is supposed to be able to remain focused on Tawheed. That both are stemming from one entity, not two. You see that? So it literally, quite literally, comes down to uh, 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 play how you practice and practice how you played. This concept of La ilaha illallah in actual 24 hours with your kid too, that's the motive, that's the thing you're supposed to be aiming towards, to maintain. You don't have that, good luck. You might apparently be good parents, but if that's not in line with being a good Muslim and a good existent human, right? And that apparently good parent, what benefit does that have? If I'm apparently able to cater to the intellectual needs, financial needs, emotional needs of my spouse and my kids and my community and so on and so forth, but as a person I'm actually the same. I haven't developed close to Allah at all, right? Then if I haven't developed, I'm at max a ladder. A ladder is something that everybody else uses to climb, but it stays exactly where it's supposed to be from the beginning. You see that? We're not ladders, we're human beings. So then the primary focus is towards our personal growth, even in the growth of our children, even in the growth of our spouses and our families and our societies even. The greatest of Maraji'in who led the basically masses from history till now, their primary focus was their own personal growth too. The Anbiya's primary growth was through tawajjuh on their own actions first, right? So as the Baba and the Mama of the house as well, when I'm looking at a difficulty, and quite literally raising toddlers is both shireen, sweet, and talq in some senses. It's sour in some senses too, right? When you're looking at both of those scenarios, as a parent, as a walid, you have to understand that you are a manager of not only the child, but primarily yourself too. You're giving tarbiyah, and in giving that tarbiyah, you are being your own murabbi as well. You see that? You're giving tarbiyah to your child and you're raising that, but at the same time, you also have to have the focus that you're supposed to be getting closer to Allah too. That's not a journey that can be put on the side. Salawat, please. Now that we've kind of established certain foundational points, and these foundational points are important. Why? Because if your practical tips and advices that I'm about to offer are disconnected from this foundational point, even if you excel at the practical tips and you can implement them the best of best ways, you might still go to hellfire. And that's not good, right? We're not here to be the best of in terms of the parenting skills, right? But be the worst in terms of actual value. That can't happen. Can't let that happen, right? The first aspect that I would like to talk about is the item of authority. Okay. We often talk about the idea of wilaya and so on and so forth in a theoretical manner. I'd like to talk about it in a very practical aspect in terms of authority. How to maintain authority with kids. And what does authority look like in the different phases of a child's development? Okay. The authority that a parent has when their children are 12 years old, how that displays and how that looks, is very different to how that authority should look when the child is 2 years old. Right? The authority is always a connected entity, right? It's authority over what? Right? You see what I'm trying to say? An authority over my car is the capacity to drive it, right? But if I was to expect that expectation from the authority over an apple, I can drive an apple. Not much of a me problem. I haven't quite got the plot. You see what I'm trying to say? So children are quite literally, when they're going through the phases, my understanding of these concepts like authority has to go through a change and appropriation as well. I don't want to use the word evolution, but it has to go through an appropriation. Why appropriation? Throw the stone back from where it came from. The hadith says it. Salawat, please. Why appropriation? Because if I don't have that, And I might have in my mind an ideal that I saw, for example, authority of my father over my siblings and myself at the age of, let's say, 14, okay? And I've had this idea of authority attached to some experiences there, and I'm trying to implement it at the age of 7. And when the child is not meeting those expectations, or the situation is not providing that type of authority, I all of a sudden feel like I don't have authority in my house. That's a me problem. I felt myself a failure. I'm expecting the effects of a truck from an apple. It's a problem. You see what I'm trying to say? So oftentimes we ourselves have unpacked and stored big titles like authority, like respect, and so on and so forth, which emanate from experiences we've had with our parents or what we've seen around us. You understand? If we simply store those titles and those meanings as is, without considering the situational and circumstantial surroundings of it, and we simply want to find that explicit nature of authority or respect in the current scenario that I'm in, I might be in a lot of trouble. Okay? Example. Okay? If I grew up in a household where my dad decided everything, what clothes to purchase, how the dressing of the children was going to be, and so on and so forth, okay? But I find myself married in a situation where my wife wants to decide the clothing my children wants to wear, okay? If I've attached the idea of authority to that level of control, okay, and I'm now placing that in this particular scenario and saying that I want to control what this 2-month-old is wearing. Do you see that? I might be in a lot of trouble. Okay? If I, in the same laissez-faire manner that one might appropriately have regarding a 2-month's clothing, if they have towards a 7-year-old girl's clothing, right? That's problematic. You see how there's a change happening? Can you guys see what I'm trying to say? That as the phase of the child's development increases, my understanding of what these terms actually mean has to change too. And if it's not changing, right, and there's a constant meaning, that until I reach that constant state or that ideal world, and so on and so forth, I'll always feel there's a lack thereof. You see that? Salawat, please. If you notice, this particular point was a point that relates to the Baba-Mama relationship. Okay? That's foundational to now working with a toddler. If you haven't considered that, right, there will be some internal strife that might occur between the Baba-Mama relationships that won't let you feel authority in the child relationship. You might be looking for something else. So this particular idea of what you mean when you say authority, what you mean when you say respect, right? What experience is that coming from? Is that applicable in my current present circumstances? Yes or no? This is very important to consider. Okay? My mama and my baba grew up in a particular culture, in a particular time, in a particular way. Their norms are different than perhaps the norms of me and my wife growing up in this particular place. You see that? If I'm not understanding of that, I might subject a particular thing to a situation here which doesn't fit appropriately. Growing up in Pakistan, for example, I remember my father coming home and my mother always, for example, being at the door, ready to open the door and bring him in and so forth, okay? Now, if I try to describe that as the ideal authority over here, sometimes both couples have to work here. In Pakistan, my father working alone could make an income such that we could run the house. But right now, living in Canada with the expenses the way they are, that might not be a ground reality for every single couple. You see what I'm trying to say? You have to look at the actual situation that you yourself are placed in, right? And appropriately translate the idea, the concepts, to fit that particular situation. Amir Mu'min has a hadith where he says that the way you were raised, right? Don't raise your kids exactly like that, because you're raising them for a different time. See that? Ya Allah. Some people will look at that particular hadith and limit it to only the idea of child tarbiyah. But the reality is that same hadith, you could broaden that to understand allocation of concepts too, allocations of expectations as well, right? They're time and era appropriate. You see what I'm trying to say? Okay. Now, when it comes to the authority in front of the children, it quite literally is the job of the baba to prop mama up and the mama to prop baba up. Fitratan, humans are such that if I was right now to start and tell you how great I am, you'd be put off by me. That's the fitri nature of mankind. You see what I'm trying to say? If Ayatollah Sistani, who we trust and respect a lot, came on a minbar and just talked about how great he is, okay? Even at that time, fitratan, people might be put off from that. You see what I'm trying to say? This nature is a fitri reality. It exists in toddlers and children too. If I go and say, I'm your baba, I got you that toy, I got you the shirt, I got you that, and so on and so forth. Or the mama says, I'm your mama, I clean you, I clothed you. Or the famous hadith of the Prophet, your mother, your mother, your mother, and then your father. Okay? Which is very accurate, but we have to open that up. I will talk about it. Okay? If time permits. The fitra of the child quite literally doesn't take that authority. There's a repulsion force there too. Some aspects of it they might take. They're like, oh yeah, you're right, you did buy me this bike. Right? But you're coupling that with an anti-force. The fitra doesn't take that very easily. In opposition, if you were to prop somebody else up and give clarity regarding how great of a position and how good of a position that particular person has, and how important of a position that particular person has in the family system towards the child, okay, then that's taken very easily by others. You see what I'm trying to say? If you were starting to compliment somebody who were there, it's a lot easier for me to swallow that than if you were complimenting yourself. You see what I'm trying to say? It is a reality in the family system as well. Oftentimes, if a partner, one spouse or the other, feels that their position in the family unit is not being valued the same way that they would like to, right? The first area is, again, assessing whether that allocation and that expectation is correct or not. That I already talked about, right? The second area is how typically people go about trying to get that. Demanding it for yourself is the wrong way to go about it. You see that? Okay. No. Again, so when it comes to toddlers, even at the young age of 2 years of age, 1.5 years of age, right? You have to start propping your partner up now. It's too late if you're talking about how great Baba is and how great Mama is when they're 10 years of age. It's too late. Okay? By that time, you should already be their superheroes. Okay? Quite literally, you're supposed to start to make the child see you, your spouse really, as their smaller Rabb. Imam Sajjad has a hadith where he says that the role of the parent is that of dalala. Dalala means, you see how we write the word right here. We see the word ha, sin, ya, and noon are written over here, correct? Right away, our mind doesn't get stuck on the words ha, sin, ya, and noon. It goes straight to the person Hussein, correct? So this becomes a symbol, a representative of a secondary meaning. Dalala is simply, when you look at A, your mind naturally goes to B. When you see a red light, your mind goes towards stop, for example. Okay? Parents are supposed to be, in their role, a dalala for Allah. That's why they're called the Rabb who are Saghir. Hence, they're supposed to be constantly a reminder of the Rabb who's Kabir. See that? So, in explaining and propping yourself up for your child, your partner plays a great role regarding you, and you play a great role regarding your partner. One of the things that Shaitan does to destroy this mechanism is he starts the tit for tat rule. So the chicken comes or the egg came first, basically. He says, when they start propping me up, I'll prop them up. You see that? See that? It's important to understand that in raising a child, it's not just the mama and the baba in the house. They're open enemies also in the house. Shaitan. See that? If you forget about this guy, right, he quite literally will mess you up big time. Salawat, please. Why did I start with the idea of authority? Because in the first phase, in the phase of the three phases that are commonly mentioned, the first phase where the child is considered a king, if you will, right? Quite literally, the thing we're supposed to be developing is authority, such that in the second phase, he could be a servant. You see that? That initial phase actually is the phase to develop the right tools, the right scaffolding for the second phase to actually be. You see what I'm saying? It's not the case that that second phase is just waiting there for us to approach. It's not the month of Ramadan where it comes towards us. No, it's something you have to create. Okay? Meaning if you fail in the first phase, the second phase might not actualize. Growing plants up, right? The phase of picking the apple off the tree can only be there in the before phase, which is actually planting and watering and pruning and taking care, correct? You simply don't do the job of the first phase and you expect to pick apples off of a tree that you haven't watered. Is that going to happen? No, it's not. Child tarbiyah is like that too. If you haven't done the right thing in the first phase, right? I'm talking this way because you guys don't have kids. You're able to listen. I feel so bad for the sisters. If I had the authority, I'd say, bring half the kids here. Salawat, please. If you simply don't work in the first phase for the things that you need for the second phase won't exist. Okay. The second phase doesn't exist, the third phase won't exist. Okay. So, but wait a second, the first phase says they're kings. How do you create authority when they're kings? You see that? Sometimes people misunderstand that. You see, what if the analogy was talking about how to talk to them? Okay? Treat them like kings, for example. What if it was talking about communication patterns? That means, well, how do you talk to a king? Do you command a king? Do you give orders to a king? Or do you give suggestions to a king? You see that? So if that's the case, then all of a sudden, the first 7 years would be 7 years where the mode of communication, the primary mode of communication, is a suggestive one. Give suggestions to the child. You see that? There are other dimensions of this particular hadith I want to open up too. But I just want to reiterate this particular point first. How you understand that, right, is very important because you're going to act on it. If you think king means let them be free, whatever they want to do, give them unparent. What's your parenting style? Not to not have a parenting style, basically. Well, you're going to be in trouble because you're going to give all the authority to them such that when they're actually supposed to be understanding you and you have an authority and so on and so forth, you will be an equal at best for them. Equal at best. In the best case scenario, they're going to see, oh yeah, he's another human like me. You see that? Remember, Shaitan is trying to actively make sure your kids don't go into the second phase appropriately. And how can you do that? By blurring what you actually have to do in the first phase. You guys have seen these TV shows where there's like teams, they come together and they have phases they have to go through and so on and so forth, right? Like a relay race, right? Okay. If I simply fool the first person to somehow, instead of running, get lost in doing a puzzle, I don't have to work very hard for the second, third, and fourth, but they can't run because the first person hasn't reached. See that? So the primary time of attack and the most fruitful time of attack quite often is in the first 7 years. Okay. Salawat, please. Talked about the idea of having a foundation of La ilaha illallah. Talked about the idea of having the understanding of Walid versus Malik. Talked about the idea of having a conceptual understanding of what we're expecting and a practical and actual one. Okay. And then now we talked about the idea of the different phases and how we're trying to prepare the child for the next phase in the initial phase. So we talked about the idea of communication. Okay. If you notice, if there is two friends, two partners, and one person is very deficient in one thing, right? If a proper teamwork was to take place, then this particular person, the other person, would have to overcome the other person's deficiencies. If you see, toddlers and children aren't very strong in expressing what they want. See that? What does that naturally tell you about what parents have to work on and have to embody? The capacity to be able to overcome that for their child. You see that? Meaning that if somebody isn't able to communicate and express themselves properly as an adult, right? What do you have to be? You have to be a good listener, you have to be quiet and give them appropriate space to be able to communicate, correct? You have to be more attentive such that their communication is more effective, correct? If I know somebody is an introvert and they just don't like speaking a lot, right? And the importance I'd place in even those subtle words they use here and there, right, would be much greater. You see what I'm trying to say? That same mechanism applies for toddlers too. As they're getting to the phase where their understanding is outgrown their capacity to communicate. They know what water is and they know that this quenches thirst, but they don't know how to ask you for water. It can be quite frustrating. You see that? In that phase, if the attention of the parent is not towards the child, right, the child quite literally goes through a very difficult phase in time. See that? In that phase, if you give that tawajjuh to that child, you are quite literally becoming their Superman, their best person. You are helping them overcome their biggest deficiency. That when they had needs, and they're typically basic needs, I'm sleepy, I'm hungry, I need water and so on, I need to play. Look at me, give me a hug, right? When they weren't able to quite literally express their foundational and basic needs, you were the one who was giving their utmost tawajjuh towards the child such that they could make those needs be met. Understand that? There's certain traits that forget humans, even animals have. One of those traits is called wafa, loyalty or allegiance, basically. That if somebody has done you a favor and somebody has looked out for you, right? Your heart softens towards them and you connect with them in a better manner. Okay. So by talking to your children in such a way that you're giving them tawajjuh, you're attentive, you understand that whatever weakness they have, I have to overcome. Okay? Then I'm actually starting to create that understanding of wafa in my child. Okay? That they sense a belonging of, this is my smaller Rabb, my sustainer. You see what I'm trying to say? You as the father and you as the mother have to develop that for your child. Salawat, please.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
I'll mention one more point before I go into a more of a discussional thing where I'd like you guys to ask general directive questions or points and we can talk about those specifically. This idea of deficiency grows as your child grows. And you'll notice that each child is a unique person. Okay? Certain children, Allah will put naturally creativity within them. Other children, Allah will naturally make them emotionally smart. Some children, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them intellectual, they can get things very quickly. Okay? As the smaller Rab, you're supposed to be assessing and looking at the child not only in their strengths but in their weaknesses, right? And you are trying to overcome and give that extra portion that that particular child is missing. What that means is that you're not copy pasting parenting styles for all children equally. Such a model is a false model. It's like me saying I'm trying to grow apples and oranges and bananas. I'm going to water them equally. Doesn't work. Okay. So quite literally, your child determines basically your parent's style at some levels. The weaknesses and deficiencies that you observe in your child, quite literally, they are the milestones that you as a parent work towards. You see that? You see that? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So I have a child who I see that in their 2-year phase, when they throw a tantrum, then they throw a tantrum. Okay? I have another child that when they're in the 2-year phase, their tantrum isn't that bad. Okay? My parenting style towards these two has to be appropriate to that particular child. You see that? If I am parenting the one who has deficiency in their anger faculty, the exact same way that I'm parenting a child who has deficiency in their shahwa faculty, let's say, I'm the bad gardener. You see that? So this readjustment of parenting style is quite literally something that you have to have tawajjuh towards that child for. If you quite simply don't have that tawajjuh towards the child, then you can't readjust that appropriately. And in this, Allah has given you something of a favor. He's made your children from you. Quite literally, He's made your children from you. What that means is, if you have been an adult who has done muhasabah and muraqabah, and you have understood how you are, how your traits are, and so on and so forth, you're going to see a mimicked version of that in your child too. You see that? So He has given a huge helping hand, quite literally, to the parents. That He's made our kids the ones who are supposed to manage from us. The faith could have been that I manage your kids and you manage my kids. That would be in a lot of trouble. You see what I'm trying to say? That's not how the faith is. We're not parents of our children only because our biological nature wants to parent our kids. You see that? We're also parents of our kids because a religious mandate has placed us and made us the smaller Rabs for our children. Salawat, please. Okay, I'll stop here in terms of the overall discussion, and I'll like you guys to actually ask questions. What I talked about was very much theoretical and very much in terms of foundations. I talked about it because I felt that this is something that is sometimes forgotten and needs to be kept in mind. With all the parenting books and parenting circles and advice and so on and so forth, I almost felt like a one-size-fit-all idea is created in the mindsets of mums and babas, right? That the parenting style stays stagnant while the child changes, which I wanted to kind of shake that up a little bit today. Okay? If you have questions, specifics, please put your hands up and I can take questions and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll start with the brother side and we'll go to the sister side. Go ahead.
So you mentioned somewhere towards the beginning about parenting skill versus I think parenting value maybe. I'm maybe not remembering the second part, but can you clarify that? Like I mean, isn't the idea of parenting to be a really good parent, like having good parenting skills, which
Yeah.
would take you closer towards the goal?
Yeah, I was saying that it's possible that a person succeeds and becomes an excellent, skillful parent. Meaning, you throw a tantrumy baby in front of them, and they can like put the baby to sleep easy. They know exactly how to parent perfectly. Okay, but that same person, if they're not doing those things with appropriate tawajjuh towards their own self development, will land himself in hellfire. At max, they'll be like a ladder that they stay stagnant while everybody else around them grows. A ladder stays exactly where it is, and everybody else uses it to climb higher, right? So while they're developing everybody around them, they're exactly where they are. They haven't changed. The same grudges and the same anger problems and the same problems they used to have 20 years ago, they still have right now. That's not. You could have great parent skills. You could be a great listener and a great spouse, but still end up in hellfire. You see what I'm trying to say? Like it's.
The idea of your kids, you could do a good job of that.
Yes.
But you yourself, because you're not working on yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
You could be somebody who's hyper focused on overcoming the deficiencies of your kids and so on and so forth.
Right.
But you simply, because Allah didn't make, basically, when He said to protect yourself from hellfire, He first said, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Then He said, أَهْلِكُمْ. If you're reversing that verse, if you're saying, قُوا أَهْلِكُمْ وَأَنفُسَكُمْ, that's a problem. That's not how the verse came down. So quite literally, in our development, the embodiment of that verse it has to be there. Save yourself from the hellfire and save your family as well. So now while you're developing your family, hellfire just means deficiencies. Like help them overcome their deficiencies. But understand that every helping of others has to start from helping yourself overcome your deficiency first. And quite literally, every situation is going to show you that when you get riled up inside. Does that answer your question? Okay. Go ahead.
I have two questions. The first part where you had mentioned about how you should be having connection with each of your children, right? So they become your friends. How do you do that when you have multiple kids in school in multiple ages? And the second question is, yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I was going to forget the first question. Can you take? Alhamdulillah, that the need that children need also varies as their phases develop. So the amount of time my 2-year-old needs is different than the amount of time that my 4th grader needs from me in terms of feeling continuous connection with me. My 2-year-old or my 3-year-old or my 1-year-old might need hours of that connection to feel connected. Simply having a 45-minute a hugging session with mama or baba isn't sufficient for them to feel that they were connected that day. You see what I'm trying to say? But my grade 7 or grade 6 or grade 8-year-old child doesn't need 8 hours of mama being in their face. If you do that, they'll feel overwhelmed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually appropriately adjusted the fitri needs of the child, right, in a manner that you quite literally, like as a parent, right, you have children in phases, right? Except for twins and quintuplets, we'll talk about those later. Except for that, you quite literally are in a situation in which you're able to appropriately attune levels based on the age group of the child. This is where aql comes in too. In family planning, one of the things to actually consider is this, that when this child is around this age group, that particular child will be around that group. Is that type of a lifestyle something that we can sustain or not? You see that? In terms of how many kids to have and so on and so forth, slight thought regarding that is important. So if somebody says that I want to have a huge gap or lack thereof and so on and so forth, it might be the right answer, but they have to have thought about it first. You see what I'm trying to say? Okay. So how do you balance it with kids going to school and so on and so forth? Depending on the children going to school, you adjust the importance there appropriately for them. If you have multiple kids going to school, okay, and some kids at home with you as well, right, then you understand that your focus and your focal point until the other kids come from home, right, has to be in a particular direction, and then aside from that, you have to divert your attention to the other kids too, right? This is all while understanding that you're not owned by your kids. You still need leisure time, you still need to intellectually grow, you still need to do ibadat, you still need to exercise, you still need to sleep, right? You can't be consumed in kids and kids alone. You see that? Kids are ni'mat, right? Allah did not give us ni'mat so that we get consumed by them. He gave them the ni'mat so we consume them. Right? Zuhud is that it's not that you don't own things, right? It's that things don't own you. Zuhud applies to parenting too. That it's not that your kids own you. You see that? It's that you own your kids in the right way, the walid or walida way. That you're able to grow in other areas of your life and so on and so forth, right? And also provide that need for them there too. Okay. Go ahead.
So we noticed that around age 2 years old, there's a lot of developmental changes, for example, like tantrums and independence and so on. So how do you deal with like this type of situation where, on one hand, the kid is learning to do things himself and he really insists on doing things himself, but sometimes that takes a while to finish it playing out. And if you're just here and trying to help him out, like you might get into a tantrum and like have all these emotions and everything. Like, how do you deal with these situations? What's the right thing to do?
Okay. First of all, having the right expectations. If a parent says my job is to make sure my kid doesn't have tantrums, they're setting themselves up for failure. Children quite literally will have tantrums, right? So first and foremost, if the adjustment of the mentality regarding the scenario, my children will have tantrums. My job is to not let the tantrums run my parenting style. That I'm an appeaser. That basically to make sure that a tantrum does not happen, the tantrums dictate exactly how I go about my day. Right? At the same time, my job is to understand what is the tantrum about. Certain times it's about the child is trying to develop a certain skill. They're inquisitive about their motor skills, or they want to kind of play and have fun with water, or this, they found something cool, right? So you create a pseudo route, you create a controlled environment for them to go and have that particular fun. For example, in Qom, where the washrooms were kind of such that you could spray water everywhere and it wouldn't get destroyed, right? If they wanted to do finger painting and make a big mess, we'd quite literally put them there and say, go ahead, go here for a bit, okay? Once a controlled time, so they would want to be there for hours, right? So we give them, let's say, a 10-minute playtime here, and then you pull them out, okay? So when you pull them out, they're going to have a tantrum. But you as a parent are like, okay, I've given them a certain amount of freedom to develop, like to have that enjoyment, that particular development that they were doing, right? But I also need them to do this, this, and this too. I can't just throw them in the. They're having fun and I'm able to do my thing, but that doesn't mean I'm a really good parent here. Simply occupying their time isn't the criteria for a successful parent. See that? Okay. So in that way, my understanding is that when the tantrum is occurring, right? If it's occurring after your responsibility as a parent, you intellectually have proved that I've done a good job. I have gotten them to do what they need to do. My laziness was not involved in like kind of pulling them and getting them away and so on and so forth, right? It was a logical decision, right? Like I have to cook food, I have to do this and that, and too. I can't let them do this the whole day, right? At that point of tantrum is happening, that is good. They actually need to experience that. Then the child themselves need to experience a situation where what they were expecting and what happened are two different things. We're helping them digest that particular experience. You see that? So you're coming down to eye level and so on and so forth, but are you spending hours and hours on that? No. You see what I'm trying to say? You give a little bit of time in helping them digest that tantrum, right? But that tantrum is good. This whole, if a teenager was having a tantrum, that'd be bad. Teenagers have tantrums because they weren't appropriately digested at 2-year-olds. You see that? So when they're going through that particular phase, you're giving them the tools to adjust to that particular emotion, which is a ground reality of life. Baba can't be in the shower with you throwing water everywhere for hours. Okay? You see that? Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. If there's any ambiguity that you want more clarity in, ask. Mr. Ahmed?
So you mentioned how, for example, if a child, one child is having a tantrum and, they get angrier, they have a tantrum in a different way compared to another child who, might react differently to the same situation. And you mentioned You know, they used to change your parenting styles for each one, or how you approach basically each child. So, can you expand a little on that? Like, what exactly you mean by that, or how you would change your, your style or your response to those two different tantrums?
Yeah. Um, Sometimes you might have a child who is very emotionally attuned. Okay, I mean that you don't have to even raise your volume or say anything much. They're very emotionally attuned to the parents' emotions. They can sense you're getting angry. You see that? If my corrective mechanism, my tambi mechanism for that child remains the same as another child who is emotionally, not there, right? I'm going to damage the emotionally attuned child. You see that? Whereas raising my voice slightly for the emotionally unattuned child was necessary for them to understand Baba Mama are upset. But for this child, raising a voice slightly is detrimental. They already got it long before you had to raise your voice. You see what I'm trying to say? If you're parenting out of internal emotion only and not addressing what they need, then you're not parenting at all. You're stuck in yourself. Okay? So, tambih and tarbiyah quite literally is pulling you out of your own self. Saying, oh, stop looking up until your nose only. There's a world beyond that. Right? So, yes, you're upset, you're angry, your child made a huge mud pie mess in the house. Okay? But this child, you understand, if you say something in this particular way, it will sit with them for a week, and this is not a thing to make them upset for a week about. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That's what I'm saying, is to adjust and attune based to the child's particular needs. You have a child that if you micromanage in the way that they're dressing, right, then it really throws them off in other areas too. Okay? And if you do that, right, and the colors have to match, and this has to be the most perfect of the perfect, and so on and so forth, and you're creating for yourself a bigger hardship 3 hours later when you're taking them to the park, that's a you problem. You made that problem for yourself. You see what I'm trying to say? So, assessing and addressing the needs of the child and appropriate intensities of what that child itself is capable of is important. And it can only happen if you're attentive of your child. You see that?
And just to follow up on that, so if you have, for example, you have two kids and, or multiple, and you're approaching them differently, but when they're young, sometimes a certain child needs to be addressed in a certain way, and the other needs to be addressed in a different way. But then sometimes, they may feel like, oh, why didn't you, do the same thing to them as you did to me? But they obviously don't understand.
It comes down to the question of trust and love. Okay? If your child feels that you've done stuff that they can't trust that you love them equally, okay? Or in that particular scenario, they're feeling such that you've been unjust to them, okay? That's also something you have to cater for, right? So you say, okay, I know that if I give this thing to this child over here, right, that particular one is also going to feel a particular way. So when I give the gift there, let's say, I don't want to give the gift over here, but I will sit here, for example. I'll sit and start, but let's say like, I think I want to give something to my I'll use my kids' examples. I want to give something to my son. I will never go straight up to my son, give the gift and walk away. I would start the conversation and have a very fun time with my daughter first. Share the idea with her. Say, I want to give this to your brother. How do you think we should give it? You see that? How do you think we should give it? Okay? Take some of the input and so on and so forth. And now all of a sudden, the thing goes to the person it has to go to without inflicting, World War III on this side either. But there's not the time to give a gift to this person. You see what I'm trying to say? So quite literally, you have to learn about your kids. You have to study your kids. You have to be more aware of more than yourself. Humans are supposed to be the Khalifa of Allah on earth, right? The Khalifa of Allah is supposed to have understanding of all of existence. We train ourselves by having understanding of a smaller scope of that, just your family unit first. You see that? It's quite literally training us to be the Khalifa of Allah in that regards. Okay. Any questions? Go ahead. How much time do you have?
10 more minutes.
Okay. Sorry for the long rant.
2 questions. You can choose to answer if you don't.
If I have them all.
The first one is you had mentioned about the child being like the master and king.
Yeah.
And instead of demanding the king, you would suggest. But sometimes suggesting only goes so far. So where do you draw the line over there?
Yeah. You have a lot of manipulation capacities. You see that? If I want to project authority to my child in, for example, picking their clothes, one time I opened the closet door and let them pick through all their clothes. Right? One time I know I'm okay with this clothes and that clothes, and I pull both of them out and I put them both in front of them. How the U.S. Works with the people. They put the people that both are devils. Which devil would you choose, basically? Okay? So you praise, okay, both the red shirt and the blue shirt, I'm fine with both of them. They're both clean, they're both appropriate for the function I'm trying to go to. Right? By putting both in front of the child, I'm giving them a supposed understanding of authority. You see that? Children are quite, their intellectual faculty is lower than the parents, not just for fun. Right? It's for the allowance of the parents to use their higher intellect to manage the children. You see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
But sometimes children are also can also be dead set on what they want. So
Yes.
you've got the 2 shirts in front of them, but they already know that I don't want either of those.
Yes.
I want that one that
Yes.
Baba doesn't want me to
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that could end up being it could take a long time to sort
Yes.
of work through
Yes,
that
could be.
situation without sort of putting a little bit more force there.
Yes. So, generally speaking, you're trying to use mechanisms to minimize the damage, but quite literally, it's life. There will be times where the damage will be there. The child will throw a tantrum. Right? That's where I talked about the idea of understanding that they're supposed to have tantrums. They're supposed to be faced with a smaller level ground reality that they can't have everything in the world. Right? And there is a larger system to things. You see what I'm trying to say? But you don't say that from anger and wrath. You say that from mercy.
Yeah.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Right.
So you come down to the level, I know it feels really bad, X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth. Very compassionate talk for a short amount of time. See that? And after that short amount of time, then you have other mechanisms that you have to act. This opens up to the door of tanbih. What does tanbih look like in Islam? It looks very different than what it looks like in the Western understanding, for example. Right? Tanbih. Corrective measures. Corrective measures. I'm not suggesting this for anybody, and I don't think that it's appropriate either in the situation, in the place we live in. I'm only mentioning this just to give you an understanding of the importance of an idea. Okay? I was in a parenting seminar where one of the experts in parenting was talking about how important it is to stick by your words for children. That if you've given your word for something, how important it is to make sure that doesn't diminish. The guy started off in that particular topic. He said, hitting is really bad. Don't do it. Okay? But if one time you were very, very, out of it, okay, and you weren't thinking clearly, and you told them, child, if you do X, I will do Y. And that Y is like I said, tanbih, hitting. Okay? Corrective measure in the corporal punishment sense. That in that situation, breaking your word is worse than not hitting. He said, don't hit them to beat them up and so on. So that's haram. It's not correct. Correct? But our fiqh does allow a baba, for example, to do tanbih. Take their hand and go like this, for example. You see what I'm trying to say? Mama, by the way, can't do it according to Atul Sistani. She needs baba's permission. Mama can't do tanbih to the child, physical hitting, without the baba's permission, according to Atul Sistani. Baba is allowed to do that, physical tanbih. But if you bruise them or red them or whatever the case may be, you gotta pay diya, man. Okay. What point was that scholar was explaining the idea that how important it is to give your word and act upon it to the child, both in the positive and the negative. If I told my child that if you get an A, I'm going to give you a car, you better buy them a car, even if it's a toy car. Okay? Okay? Don't break your promises with them. And if you said, if you do this, I'm going to hit you, you better go and just tap their hand at the very least. Like be known as somebody who, when they say something, it actually happens. That gives you authority. You see what I'm trying to say? This is a very important skill to understand.
For both sides.
For both sides, yes. The Tambi example, I explained the fiqh ruling too. Don't hit your kids, please.
Can you comment a bit about at this age of life their sleep? So sleeping with parents, sleeping in their own room, falling asleep with parents when alone, sleep training.
Kick them out of your bed as soon as you can. As soon as possible. They should not be in the parents' bed. As I said, they do not own you. If you take physical intimacy out of a husband-wife relationship, it's like taking the central pillar out of a tent. The other pillars might prop some aspects of it up, but the central pillar is missing. You understand? Physical intimacy allows for the man to provide emotional intimacy. Okay? And if emotional intimacy and physical intimacy are both gone from a relationship between a husband and wife, So one of the barriers in actually having that capacity is having a third wheel. So quite literally, as soon as you can, provide accommodations for them elsewhere. And it has to be done in a gradual way. First you put one of those toddler beds that are right beside the bed of Baba and Mama. They get used to that. Then that thing gets a little bit further from the bed, for example. They get used to that, slowly. Then it gets moved by the door. They get used to that. And then it goes out of the door, but the door stays open. They get used to that. These are phases we went through. I'm letting you know. Okay? And then the door stays closed, but they're outside the door. Okay? You see that? And then slowly they go into their own private place. Like their own room, their own toilet, their own room.
What would that age gap be from like bed to bed, outside the door?
It's not the age, it's a skill or a trait you're looking for in your child. How many hours can they sleep at night without you having to get up and go to them and come bring them back and so on and so forth? Some kids night wean naturally, very quickly. Okay? So that child can move out quicker. I mean, the reason they're in the bed is because they need something from the bed, right? So as soon as that particular trait is overcome, that particular child is ready to be prepped to kind of adjust to a further situation. Does that make sense?
What about kids who they fall asleep in their own bed, but when you wake up, they made their way to your bed?
Yeah. That's very natural. You can't lock their kid's door and stuff and so on and so forth, but you could lock your door and create a rule that the child can knock. You see that? This adab is present in our deen of dakhul bab, knocking before entering and so on and so forth. This tells the child that they have capacity to come in. When they do knock, be an attentive parent and open up, right? And so on and so forth. But you're creating that understanding in them. Naturally speaking, in the early phases, they might have a soiled diaper or they might have a nightmare that they want to come and they need help for. And you as a Baba and Mama have to be there for that. You probably have baby monitors there anyways, right? So you're not disengaging from the child completely, but you're also not letting them engage fully in your private life as well. You're trying to create a healthy boundary that you can thrive as Mama Baba and you can thrive as husband-wife because you have both roles on you. What the problem is that typically people thrive in one and not the other. Either they're great husband-wife but horrible Mama Babas. They do the cry-out method and God knows what else, and the child goes through torture. Okay? Or they're great Mama Babas but horrible husband-wives. But Islam says, Al-Amr bayn al-Amrayn. Okay? The middle path is the best. The child knows that they can come into your room, but it's after dakhul bab. The door is locked after dakhul bab. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sorry, just I know we're taking a lot of sides from them, but
I wasn't even looking at. Is there any question on this side?
that's my
One question.
When you're talking about like weaning at nighttime, right? Like, for example, like a child weans like twice a night or feeding, like going through the night.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about you're looking for that type of like weaning off, can you kind of give me a little bit more example as to like if a child is like feeding once a night, twice a night, or just completely weaned off, is that the time to
First and foremost, the Holy Quran is quite clear. It doesn't say hawlain only, it says kamilain. It puts a second ta'keed, and there's multiple other ta'keed. It says for 2 years, the child has a right to breast milk. Okay? It's not only for nutrition that they need that. It's actually for their emotional development, their intellectual development, their social development. It's more. Yeah. They quite literally need that for much more than just the nutrition in terms of the physical stuff. If you judge based off of the physical stuff, as soon as they're starting to eat meat and as soon as they're starting to eat other stuff, the non-thinking parent might start to wean them off right away. Okay? The Quran knows that you might do that, and that's why it does ta'keed. It says, hawlain kamilain, 2 years, they're right. Unless that there's medical reasons or another child comes, the doctor said don't do that, and those are exceptions. You see what I'm trying to say?
So like if there was a pregnancy that happened, let's say the child is a year old.
Exactly, and then the second pregnancy happens, and the doctor is saying it's detrimental for the second pregnancy, then you have a reasoning for that.
But,
That's perfectly fine.
but normally Islamically, if there was another pregnancy, you could still technically feed the child.
What do you mean if there was?
Like if there was, for example, like you have a 1-year-old and then you find like a
If there's no health problems and developmental problems, yes, you can feed both children.
and
Not a problem.
age limit for the child is 2 years for boys and 1.5 for girls.
No,
or
hawlain kamilain is for both boys and girls.
2 years
Yes,
is okay.
hawlain kamilain. We're Sunni Shia together in this one. Having said that, night weaning then looks a little bit different. Mom does need sleep, right? So perhaps you're using a milk bottle, an express milk, and Baba takes over certain slots of times and allows for mom to have that sleep because that's a need too, right? 2 year hawlain kamilain doesn't mean that now kill your wife and kill yourself and kill everybody else too. It means adjust appropriately.
One more question from the sisters.
If there's a question from the sisters, I think, go ahead.
About like say trust was broken early on.
I can't hear it.
I had a question like say trust was broken early on.
Between who?
Like the parents and the child.
Okay.
Like early on.
Okay.
And then how do you kind of rebuild that? If you have been rebuilding it for years, but now like at a later stage.
Yeah. Allah has made children very forgiving. One of the traits that Allah basically says we should acquire from the kids, there's 6 traits in Hadith Mi'raj that are mentioned about the children. 3, the Holy Prophet himself, Allah encourages him, take these 3 traits. And there's 3 traits which Allah says don't take these 3 traits from the kids. One of the traits that's very good is that children are quick to forgive. Okay? So, because Allah knows that we are not the best Rabs, we're the Saghir Rabs. We're going to make mistakes. So He's helped overcome our deficiencies through giving the children certain efficiencies. They're very efficient in forgiving, for example, because we're very deficient in doing the right thing and we make lots of mistakes. You see that? So this balance is there as well. And that is inappropriate to your child. Your child's forgiving capacities are appropriate to you as the mother raising them. You see that? So, if there is a difficulty that you're not able to patch things up quickly with the child, right? Then there's a technique that's missing. That requires more like a specific talk to have. But there's a technique that you're missing. Otherwise, the capacities are there. You see the nail and a hammer, they're designed to be put on the wall, right? But if I put the nail sideways, I hammer day and night, it's not going to go on the wall. I'm going to damage the wall and the nail. The deficiency there is in technique. You see what I'm trying to say? Otherwise, overcoming mistakes should be very natural and quick with children. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
more, I believe.
So he did.